All right. Hi, everyone. How are you all doing? How's everyone's week going, Olivia? How about you?
Doing all right. Got midterms, but that's okay. We'll get through it.
Monty, how's your week going?
My week is going pretty well. I also have a couple of big tests coming up, but just been kind of inside waiting for the rain to subside.
Yeah, you might be inside all week. It looks like we got a lot of rain coming. Yeah.
Yes, we sure do.
I had a question. I was curious, what was everybody's dream job when they were 10 years old? If you have a dream job, what was it? Monty, do you want to start off?
Yes, I had a couple of dream jobs and they all had to do with science. Paleontology was a big one. I loved fossils and dinosaurs. Marine biology, of course. And the biggest one, which was kind of funny, but my grandpa worked at NASA, was that I really wanted to study the stars and be an astrophysicist from a very young age, which is kind of hilarious. But you know, kids will be kids.
Austin, how about you? Did you have a dream job?
No, I feel like I don't remember ever having that one. I always really liked the ocean though, so marine biology was up there. And then I really like building things, so I really wanted to be an engineer. Then I really like rocks, so I was like, ooh, geology is really cool. But they have all kind of come and gone, and I'm sticking with biochemistry.
Well, I think we all agree with you that biochemistry is a great path. Olivia, how about you? Did you have a dream job?
I loved animals, and I definitely wanted to do something with them. So I think veterinarian was pretty high on the list. I think a lot of kids go through that phase. Um, yeah, that was the big one. I don't remember any other big obsessions.
Yeah, all solid jobs. I feel like any of those would have been a good career. Lacey, how about you?
I would agree. I also went through the vet stage, and I also wanted to be an astronaut for a minute, but both of those have also kind of come and gone.
Emily says you wanted to be a zookeeper rather than a vet growing up. That would be a really fun job. And I feel like there's a lot of movies that are like how all the animals come to life at night. So that seems like a very good career path too. How about you, Nicole?
I was definitely on the same path as Monty with both marine biology and astronomy. They were both very interesting to me. I loved it. Although I did also go through a phase where I was in musical theater and I really thought that being on Broadway would be fun. But then I realized that's a lot more people than I had ever performed in front of. And no, thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to remember what my dream job when I was 10. I know I've wanted to be a doctor for like at least since middle school, but I don't know if I was still want to be a doctor when I was 10. I know I wanted to be a firefighter for a while, and I think my parents are probably happy that I don't because it's kind of a risky job and maybe not the best stable way to live. But I guess in Oregon now it's becoming a very very good career, and we need a lot more firefighters. So maybe some volunteer firefighting would be my future. But for the most part, I think that I've kind of kept with my dream job. Has everybody else transitioned? Anybody else still on path for their dream job? Anybody can chip in.
I know I definitely just recently in the last couple of years realized how much I really did want to do medicine. I think the class that switched it for me was anatomy and physiology. I realized how interesting the human body really is and how much I could help people if I understood it better. So yeah, that was definitely a new interest.
Yeah, I always joked that instead of studying the whole universe, I got really, really interested in individual people and their brains and the universe that exists inside every single person. So now I'm studying neuroscience, brain science, and I still feel like I get to explore a bunch of little universes. So pretty happy with how things are turning out so far.
Well, thank you all for sharing. I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's 4:05. So thank you everybody for joining us today for this webinar. Today we'll be creating human cells out of Play-Doh and some other household items. So keep in mind that to make our Play-Doh, we will be using a stovetop. If you don't have a stovetop, a microwave will also work, but for a stove, we recommend a parent is nearby to help you as necessary. And so for our webinar, we have quite a list of supplies, as you can see on the slide. If you're watching this later from home, feel free to pause it right now and go grab your supplies and make sure you have them handy. But for now, we'll continue on. And as well as the supplies, make sure you just have the following handy, something to mix with, such as a spoon, a mixing bowl, as well as a measuring cup and some measuring spoons for making the Play-Doh. And when we're doing introductions, feel free to go and grab any remaining supplies you might need. But from now on, we'll get started. So my name is Maya Livni, and I'm a second-year student at Oregon State University. I'm majoring in biochemistry and molecular biology. And one fun thing I like to do outside of school is I like to read, and I also like to bike around.
I'm Lacey. I'm a first-year student also studying biochem and molecular biology. And outside of school, I like to paint and draw.
Hi, I am Nicole. I am a second year student also majoring in biochemistry and molecular biology. And my favorite thing to do outside of school is ride four-wheelers at the coast.
Hi, I'm Monty. I'm a second year, but I'm actually a biochemistry and biophysics major, so a little bit different, but same vein. And some things I like to do outside of school, I also like to read, I like to cook, I like to hike around, just get outside.
Hi everyone, my name is Austin. I'm a third year here at OSU studying biochemistry and molecular biology. And something I like to do is go mountain biking around the McDonald Forest.
I'm Olivia. I'm a second year biochemistry and molecular biology major. And some things I like to do outside of school is I like to run and go for walks in my neighborhood.
Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves and for being with me today to lead this activity. We're all excited to get to lead you through a really important topic in biology. But as a general note, just if you think of any questions throughout this presentation, feel free to write your questions down. And at the end of our presentation, I'll give you an email and you can email any questions you have about our presentation or about our activity to that email, and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as we can. And as mentioned, we're all biochemistry and molecular biology or biophysics majors. And as biochemistry majors at Oregon State University, we take a lot of biology and chemistry classes in school. And so we want to teach you about a very important topic in biology, which is cells. So today we're going to learn about a human cell and why cells are so important. And we hope you have fun building a cell with Play-Doh with us today and learning a little bit more about the scientific field of biology along the way.
Take a minute and write down everything you know about cells. It can be anything. Have you learned anything about cells in school? Where do we find cells? We'll all take a minute and write some ideas down too.
So what is a cell? A cell is the basic building block of all life on Earth. Each and every one of us are made up of many tiny cells. They provide structures for our bodies, use nutrients for energy, and carry out many different functions within our bodies. They are like the bricks that make up the many different buildings around OSU's campus, working together to form the structure that makes a building what it is. We have over 30 trillion cells in each of our bodies, and they all work together to make us who we are. To put that number into perspective, if every person was a cell, it would take over 7 million populations of Oregon or 3,900 populations of the Earth to make a single human body.
Okay, it's time for my personal favorite part of this whole activity, which is making some Play-Doh. Now, if you have Play-Doh on hand or something else that's kind of pliable that you can press things into, that's cool, use that. But just hang with us until we've got ours made. For everyone watching later at home, we're gonna run through our instruction slides real quick so you can see what the process looks like, but we'll run it through together in just a minute. So we're going to measure out all of our ingredients. These little things will soon look very familiar. We're going to combine our wet ingredients in a small saucepan, and you can color it or scent it if you like, totally optional. And then we're going to heat it up. So make sure that there's somebody around who can make sure everybody is safe. Then we're going to add our dry ingredients slowly to the wet, and it's going to come together kind of slowly. It'll look crumbly at first. You can see in that picture, but just keep it on the heat until that stickiness kind of wears off. You'll find it comes together in a nice little ball, and then you're going to transfer it to a piece of wax paper or some heat resistant surface, let it cool for a few minutes, and then we're going to knead it, and then we're going to use it to build some cells. All right, let's get started. Welcome to my little kitchen. So because we're doing this all together, I'm doing it real time. We're going to measure out our ingredients first. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to take a mixing bowl here. Doesn't have to be very big. We're not making a ton of Play-Doh, thankfully. Now I have a little bit of just all-purpose flour left, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. You're going to take 1 cup of flour, just a nice even cup. So we don't have to be super exact with how we measure this. I know some bread makers would be kind of mad about how I'm doing it, but we're just making Play-Doh. It's okay. Just don't want it to overload. All right, got my cup. I'm gonna go ahead and dump that in my bowl. Perfect, and I can set all this aside. Won't need any more flour. We're gonna take some salt. Any kind you have is fine. We're using quite a bit of it. We're gonna use a whole 1/4 of a cup. So if we did eat this, it would just taste like salt, not super awesome. But we're just gonna go ahead and measure out 1/4 of a cup. Awesome. And add that into our flour. Great. And I have a whisk here. I'm just gonna get a little stir. Make sure they're all combined in there. Perfect. Not rocket science yet. We'll just set that aside. Right. Now we're gonna take our handy dandy saucepan. You're gonna measure out 3/4 cup of water. Just tap water, any water. Now I've already done this. I'm gonna go ahead and add it to my pot. Perfect. And then you're gonna take a tablespoon of oil. If you don't have vegetable oil on hand, olive oil will work, avocado oil, any kind of cooking oil you have. We just wanna give it some pliability, some fattiness. So use a tablespoon. I don't have a tablespoon measurement, so I'm just gonna eyeball it. It's all right. Just add it straight into the water. And optional, if you've got some acid on hand in the form of a lemon maybe, I have some vinegar. This will help your Play-Doh be a little bit more pliable, a little bit softer. So I'm just gonna add a teeny tiny little bit, another capful or so. This is just white vinegar. I'm gonna add that in. Again, lemon juice will work. If you wanna squeeze like 1 lemon's worth of juice in there, that's cool. But this is really optional. It's not super high stakes. All right, so I've got my wet ingredients all together. If you have any scents or colorings you'd like to add, I have some coloring gel here. It's green. Green is my favorite color, so I'm gonna go ahead and add a few drops. Gotta get that top off right now.
I'm not super excited. I'm making mine brown, so maybe more like a cell, but not as fun.
It's okay. Anything works. I'm just gonna add my green in there. Cells aren't really green, but, well, I guess plant cells are green, but we're using our imagination with this one. I'm not gonna set mine, but, all right, I'm just gonna give that a little mix. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat on carefully to medium. If you have a finicky stove, you'll know your stove better than I do. We want this to get pretty hot, but we don't want it to boil. So whatever that looks like for your stove, we're just gonna keep it on for a few minutes. Don't touch it like I just did, that was bad. But in the meantime, let's talk. Just while we're letting that heat up, I have a question for everybody, which is, what has been your favorite class you've taken at school and why?
I think favorite class that I have taken has been the introductory genetics class. It made me realize that maybe that's what I want to do. I want to work with DNA and all the things associated with it.
I would probably say I haven't been here that long, but so far just the general biology class I really like. So, but I'm looking forward to taking more classes.
Yeah, I think up until this term, my favorite class was also the general biology class, but then I took cell and molecular biology. And that's now my favorite class. It's just you dive even deeper and just like I learned so many interesting things that like are so applicable to everyday life. So that's always super interesting when things you can actually like see them in real life.
Last quarter, I took Intro to Neuroscience, and that was a very cool class and kind of made me realize that's probably something I want to go into in the medical field. But yeah, very, very cool.
Definitely. My favorite class at OSU was actually not a science class. It was a linguistic anthropology class, which is all about how different cultures speak and have spoken for their history of like humankind and how they talk to their families and what their languages are made of. And it does relate to my major because I want to work with kind of speech pathology and how the brain forms and understands language. So it all kind of interconnects, but learning about other people is a very good way to spend your time. Somebody else want to go? I'm just waiting for it to bubble up.
Yeah, some of my favorite classes have always been Spanish classes, although I did also enjoy medical anthropology. Anthropology is very interesting. But my all-time favorite was probably medical Spanish, just because it feels really applicable, and it's really nice because we also had a lot of conversation requirements. So it was focused very much on practicing applying the Spanish language, and I felt like it felt very useful. Yeah, it's very interesting to learn really what feels like really complicated words in English in another language. It adds another level to it. Yeah.
Just for a quick interjection, so if you decide to use a microwave to make your Play-Doh, as I did, I would suggest just putting your liquids in the microwave for maybe 90 seconds to heat it up if you're not using the stovetop, and then just add your ingredients into the bowl of liquid. So I'll let Monty take it over now.
Yes, I'll just stall for a few more seconds. It's really getting there. I'm starting to see some little bits of bubbles on the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and call that good. I'm going to turn my heat down to medium low-ish. I'm going to keep it on while I add my dry ingredients, but just barely,
Hey, Monty, can we? Yeah.
Yes.
Can we see it?
Perfect. All right, welcome back. So I've got my water, it's nice and hot, turn the heat down. We're just gonna add our dry ingredients little by little. So not quite all at once, but I'm just gonna add a little bit. I'm gonna take a wooden spoon and stir it in. And a little bit more. And stir it. Just nice and slow. It'll all come together pretty quickly. I'm just gonna go ahead and add the rest. Like I said, we want to keep that heat on just to get rid of some excess moisture. But if you find that it's pretty crumbly and it's looking like it doesn't need to dry out, go ahead and turn that heat off. I got a really pale shade of green going on here, but that is okay. Okay, so you'll see mine is just kind of coming together. It doesn't look awesome right now, but it will in just a sec. So I'm just going to keep this on the heat until I feel like it's not a sticky mess. But it's looking pretty good, I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off once I feel like it's come into a ball for the most part, like that. Not super pretty, but it will be. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my heat off, and then I'm going to transfer this onto a surface that I pre-prepared with a little bit of heat-resistant plastic wrap. You're gonna wanna set it down on something, especially if you've dyed it, just so it doesn't get any stains anywhere. So I'm just gonna plop it down right there. Make sure not to touch it because it will be hot. And we're done. We're done with the stove. We're done cooking. So we're just gonna let this sit for a few minutes because it's gonna be really hot. We don't wanna touch it quite yet because we'll be kneading it and moving around with it. So in the meantime, we're gonna talk a little bit about cells.
And yeah, just like Monty was saying, back to the microwave option, if it's still sticky, feel free to pop it in the microwave for another 15-20 seconds. Just make sure you don't go and do it small increments to make sure that you don't like fry your dough, because if it becomes baked, it's hard to mold it later. So just do small increments if it's still sticky and just keep on putting it in the microwave until it feels like a good consistency.
All right, we're back to cells. So a cell is just like a town. There are all sorts of different buildings and people that work together to allow a town to function smoothly. The cell is exactly the same, but instead of buildings and people, the cell has different organelles that work together to keep the cell functioning smoothly. Each organelle has a specific job that it does for the cell. Later, we will go over the different organelles and each of their own unique jobs. So, all of the many different organelles. So an organelle is an organized structure within the cell. If we zoom farther into the cell, we will find the different structures that all carry out unique functions for the cell. This picture shows the many different organelles that cells have, and we will start to describe each organelle and what they do for the cell. Let's go ahead and get our supplies ready. For each organelle we will have a unique item that will represent them in our model. So we'll go through each organelle and their items. So for the cell membrane, we'll be using a plastic wrap. For the cytoplasm, the Play-Doh, which you guys have all made, I'm sure they all turned out really good. Then we'll have the nucleus, which we'll use a marble or something of a similar shape and size. Then for the ER, we'll use a few pieces of string, the Golgi apparatus, a few pieces of tape. The ribosome, we'll use beads or anything similar to that shape, something kind of small. Lysosome, we'll use beads or anything small again. So you can use beads twice or use something else if you'd like. Then for the cytoskeleton, we'll use dried long pasta. And then finally for the mitochondria, we'll use dried kidney beans or any sort of beans that you have. And if you don't have a specific item, that's okay, and it can be substituted for anything that you have around your house.
All right, so I'm gonna test my Play-Doh. It'll probably still be a little warm, but mine personally is not too hot to be needed. But if yours is, just wait, it's okay. Maybe pop it in the freezer or break it in half so it cools down faster. But you don't want to hurt your hands, so just wait until it's ready. But mine is ready. It's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to knead it as if it were bread. It's a little hard on plastic, so I'm gonna move that aside. So I'm just gonna knead it back and forth. Make sure it's cooled down enough for you. If it's too hot, just stop. It's okay. It will all come together in time. So as you can see, it's getting much smoother already. It's actually looking pretty good, pretty quickly. Got that nice light spring green color. Fun. Just gonna make sure it's nice and ready. And that comes into a nice little ball. Like that. Woohoo, look at that. That's some good looking Play-Doh. All right, I'm gonna bring my plastic back. This is my cell membrane, which you'll learn all about. And then I'm gonna go ahead and set my ball right in the center. And I'm just gonna press it out. Press it out into a nice flat disc. So we're just looking for a circle with a little bit of height to it. You can see that I've got mine about this thick, maybe a finger width thick. I'll probably press it out a little bit smaller, or a little bit wider, but flatter, because I want some good surface area. I want to look at all my fun organelles. All right, oh gosh, looking good. All right, this is my completed cell base. Ooh, it looks good. I'm excited. So we're just gonna stick all of our organelles in here. Yeah,
This is what mine looks like. Mine's brown. And we got a really good question. Monty, maybe you could answer this. Does the cell have to be round?
We're going to talk about what this Play-Doh is and why in the world are we using Play-Doh?
Monty, I think you may have froze real quick.
Oh, sorry, am I back now?
Yes, I think, unless if it was me.
No,
Monty,
no,
Monty, does the cell have to be round?
So our cell is going to be round because it's an animal cell. Plant cells are more square-like, but actually cells have all different kinds of shapes. We're going to make ours round just because it's nice and simplified, but you'll see at the end of our presentation that cells have a lot of different shapes and it can look pretty cool, and we'll explain why. So our Play-Doh here, wonderful, beautiful Play-Doh, is nice and pliable, and what it represents is cytoplasm. So cytoplasm is something that holds all of your organelles, and in reality, it's actually a fluid. So when you hear people say, oh, humans are 90-something% water, this is kind of what they mean. This is where it all goes. So all the little cells in your body are full of this cytoplasm, and the organelles can float around in the cytoplasm, and it allows them to move and transport around. And so in this activity, we'll be using a town analogy to describe our cell. So if our cell was a town, you could kind of think of the cytoplasm as the land and, more accurately, even all the air that the whole town is in. So all of the area is held inside of this cytoplasm. So cytoplasm, like I said, allows the organelles in the nucleus to move around and provides a basis for their function because they need something to function in, just like we need air to breathe. And it also gives the cell its shape and its size. So that's why cells can have different kinds of shapes, because we're talking about a liquid. So it's kind of like the water in the ocean, and all of our organelles are like the little fish and the big whales and the plants and the jellies just kind of swimming around.
So the next organelle we're going to talk about is the nucleus. And the nucleus is a large spherical organelle in the center of the cell, and it holds all the instructions that the cell needs to make things called proteins. Proteins are very important for life, and your cells need instructions to tell them how to make these proteins. The instructions, which we call DNA, to make proteins are contained in the nucleus. On the right, you can see this picture of a real cell with the nucleus inside. It's the great big ball in the middle of the ball. As you can see, it is round and large like a marble, which is what we're going to use for our representation in our model. The nucleus is kind of like City Hall in our town. City Hall contains all of the laws and all the instructions for how the town should be run. In the same way, the nucleus contains all the instructions for how the cell should be run.
So in our case, you can use a marble or a rock, or I'm actually going to be using a golf ball because that's what I have handy. So it's going to be placed pretty much in the center, as you could see in that image. So for me, I'm just going to put it about there. You kind of push it into the Play-Doh, make sure it sticks. But yeah, just should look something like that.
I've got a little tea strainer. That's what I had on hand, so I'm going to press mine right into the center.
Okay, next is the endoplasmic reticulum, and it sounds really complicated, but you can just call it the ER if you want. That's even what we call it and what our professors call it in class, just because it's easier to say. So the ER looks sort of like wiggly strips that are right next to the nucleus, and it helps in the making of some proteins. And if the proteins are going to be shipped out of the cell, then the ER has to help. And the ER is a lot like a construction site where important things are built for our town.
Yeah, so I have some string right here, just a few pieces, a couple inches will do. I have mine pre-cut, so if you need to take a minute and cut yours, that's fine, but I just have 4 pieces. You have a lot of it, but just for our representation, we'll put some. So for me, I'm kind of just pressing it down. It should be around the nucleus, kind of like a shield almost. So if you can see, it kind of creates arcs around the nucleus. Let's see, I'll put it in and then I can show you again. But yeah, just kind of push into the Play-Doh. It's a little hard to get it to stick. But yeah, so if you can see that, it's just kind of around the nucleus, these strings. And then, Monty, do you want to show us yours?
Yeah, so I have some rubber bands and I'm just going to kind of stick them. Actually, I'm just going to go right around because they don't want to stick in there, and that's okay. So I'm just going to go right around the cell, or the nucleus, excuse me. There's going to be my little ER there. Cute.
All right, next we have ribosomes. So ribosomes are small and round organelles that are in the cytoplasm or attached to the ER. Ribosomes work kind of like builders in our towns by using information from the nucleus to make proteins. The ribosomes are able to take instructions just like construction workers do and build molecules.
Yeah, so I'm going to be taking some quinoa for my ribosomes, but if you have beads or something small, that also works, anything that's really tiny. So I have some little white quinoa seeds. And as Lacey said, there's lots of ribosomes, so I'm just going to sprinkle ribosomes all through my cell. They can be anywhere in the cell, especially they like to be around the ER, which is what we just placed last, which is right around the nucleus. So if you want to put extra beads around the nucleus, you can do that. But really, you can be pretty generous with your ribosomes. There's hundreds of thousands of ribosomes in your body. And so mine kind of looks just like this. There's little seeds around. But yeah, so there's my ribosomes.
Yes, I have couscous, which is nice and teeny tiny, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to sprinkle them around. You can't really see them, but that's okay. There are tons of them, and they're super small. They look good, especially around that ER. Perfect.
Next, we're going to talk about the Golgi, which is sometimes called the Golgi apparatus, but we can just call it the Golgi. The Golgi is made up of little sacs that are stacked on top of each other, and not too far from the ER. The Golgi will package proteins and decide where they need to go, whether it's inside or outside of the cell. To make the Golgi, take a piece of tape, fold it in half. Maya will show you. The Golgi is just like the post office. Its job is to package proteins so that they can get where they need to go, just like the post office figures out where the mail needs to go.
Yeah, so I'm going to take my tape. So I'm using some yellow tape, so maybe you can see it a little better. Just rip off a piece, maybe about an inch or so, and fold it in half just so it's not sticky. If you don't have tape, even like a little piece of paper would do. You just want something with a little bit of structure so that when you stick it in your Play-Doh, you can show it off a little more. So yeah, I'm just going to do 4 pieces of tape, but you can do more or less. And then I'm going to be putting it in. It almost looks like a little star. So the first one, maybe make a little bit of an arc, kind of place it in anywhere in your Play-Doh. And then I'm going to put another piece. Again, I'm just doing 4 pieces, but there's lots of, you could almost call them arms to the Golgi. And you have lots of Golgi in your cell, not as many as you have ribosomes, but for our case, we'll just put in 1 Golgi just so we can see what they look like. But yeah, it's almost like a little star. So mine looks like that, if you can see it. And yeah.
I have
Monty, what is yours?
I have bow tie pasta because Golgi are nice and folded, just like bow ties. They're kind of scrunched, and it's got little arms. So I'm just going to press mine into my cell, kind of, in a few different places. Oops, that one's broken. Perfect.
Okay, and up next is mitochondria. And mitochondria are medium-sized. They're smaller than the nucleus for sure, but much bigger than the tiny little ribosomes. Mitochondria are shaped like an oval, and they're made up of an inner and an outer layer. And you can see that in the picture. The outer layer is green and the inner layer is yellow. And the layers are called membranes, which we'll talk more about later. And the mitochondria create energy by making molecules that are called ATP, which other organelles can consume. So it sort of functions like a gas station, because just like how cars run off of gas so that people can work in the town, organelles run off of ATP so that the cell can keep working.
Okay, let's add some mitochondria to our cell. So in my case, I'm using rice. If you have beans, that's even better. Beans are more the actual shape of mitochondria, but rice is what I had on hand. So I have some dried rice. And again, I'm just going to push it in. They can be anywhere in the cell. They're anywhere around the nucleus, but you can just be generous with them again. You have multiple of them, and then just make sure you push them into your cytoplasm. So it's going to be a little hard to see mine, but I have some little brown rice that are my mitochondria.
I have craisins, some dried cranberries, which are also my favorite snack, but I will sacrifice them for the sake of my cell because I wanted them to be nice and visible. So I'm just gonna press mine in all around my cell. Gonna make it a nice, powerful cell. Lots of energy coming from this one. Looking good. Oh, I think you have a question in the chat. How many should we put? Well, actually, the amount, or the number, I should say, of mitochondria in the cell kind of depends on what the cell does. So for example, your muscle cells work really hard and need a lot of energy. So they have a ton of mitochondria. But some different cells, they don't need that much. So it kind of depends on the cell. You can choose however much you want and whatever kind of cell you want this to be.
All right, and up next we have the lysosome, which is a small but very powerful tool in the cell. It holds enzymes, and it can decide whether something that comes into the cell needs to be broken down for use or put somewhere else. It sort of functions like a recycling plant. So it takes the things that can be used by the cell, like how we reuse recycled materials, and it separates them from things that aren't useful or could even harm the cell, like garbage, which has to be moved to the trash service.
All right, let's add some lysosomes to our cell. So in my case, I'm going to use some beads, but anything that's a bead shape is fine. You preferably want your lysosomes to be a little bit bigger than your ribosomes. And so my lysosomes are little beads, just slightly bigger than my quinoa. And again, you have multiple of these in your cell, so you can be pretty generous with where you put them. In my case, I have about 15 that I'm putting. But yeah, just make sure you just push them in and they should just look a little something like that, just around the cell.
Yeah, I have little beans as well, little dried beans. I'm just going to press them in. We don't want anything going to waste in this cell. So we need these little guys to do their hard work.
All right, so next we have the cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton plays many roles, including with the movement of objects around the cell. Similar to the roads in a town, the cytoskeleton creates pathways which things can be transported on. The cytoskeleton can be presented by something long and narrow like dried pasta, which Maya will talk about in a second. An interesting aspect of the cytoskeleton is that it can be constructed and deconstructed in order to fit the functions of our cells.
All right, so I have my pasta. In my case, I'm using some black bean pasta, so it's a dark brown color. Maybe you can see it a little better, but I'm just going to be kind of pressing it around the border of my cell because the cytoskeleton is supposed to give the cell some structure and some protection. And so it's okay if your pasta breaks, just put a layer on the outside. And you have many layers of cytoskeleton, but for our case and our cell, we'll just be putting one layer around the outside. If you have more time, you're welcome to add 2 or 3 layers and double it up, but one layer is sufficient for now. And yeah, something like that. So just around the outside.
I'm also using long pasta. I have rice noodles. Let's see if I can get one to go without breaking. Maybe. Oh, nope. That's okay. They're just doing their job. Just gonna put it around the outside, just like Maya said. Perfect.
Okay, and last but certainly not least is the membrane. And the membrane acts like a barrier and allows a cell to decide exactly what it wants to let enter and leave the cell. For example, it likes to let food and water in, but not harmful things like viruses. This is similar to crossing a border into another country or entering the city limits, although a city isn't quite as strict as a national border.
And as Monty said in the beginning, when we were laying out our plastic wrap, this is our membrane, and so you should already have it around your cell. You probably can't see it too well, but yeah, if you used foil, that also works. But yeah, you just want some layer protecting your cell.
Yep, I have mine down just as before. I can wrap it up if I want. It will go all the way around the cell, but I don't want to ruin my precious artwork.
So like we said before, all life on Earth is made up of cells. However, even though all life is made up of cells, cells can vary depending on what life form they're from. Here's a picture of 4 different cells taken from a human, a beaver, a plant, and a fish. Notice how different they all look, and even though they are cells, they will look different. So why don't everyone take some time, and if you have any idea, drop it in the chat on what cells you think are what. I'll give you guys about a minute, and then I'll get back to you guys. All right, so probably not a minute, but close to it. Hopefully you guys gave your best effort. So we'll go over, so 1 is a human cell. And then the second one is the cell from a beaver. So that's kind of cool, because even though we're both mammals, they have very different looking cells. 3 is an example of a pine tree cell. So you can tell it's a lot different from ours, but still has the same kind of structures. And then 4 is an example of a salmon cell, so one of a fish. And then we had a question in the chat that says, do all human cells look like that? Do you guys want to answer that? Open it up to everyone.
I can definitely say that not all cells from every animal look the same, including humans. There's different types of tissues, like muscles, you know how they connect from one joint to another. They tend to be more long because they're meant to cover long distances, and skin cells tend to be a little bit more flat so that they can cover everything well, and some of them even overlap. So yeah, different cells have different shapes and sizes based off of function. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a key point of that, I'll just touch on it really quick, is the function really dictates the structure of the cell. It can really have a big impact on what it looks like. And so we'll move on. So our models that we made are really good for allowing us to organize our cell and give us a really good idea of what the cell looks like and what each organelle does and how they interact with other organelles within the cell. But cells are constantly changing and moving around, and they really aren't as static as our cells. So this is the video showing just how much they can move.
All right, so the science of cell biology can be applied to many different careers, all in the STEM field. Every day, people working in career fields such as pharmacy and research use cell biology to help the world around them. Knowing what our cells are composed of and how they work inside our bodies is very important to many different careers, even branching outside of cell biology. For example, people working in pharmacy fields need to be well equipped with knowledge of our cells in order to recommend the right medicines to keep us healthy. Furthermore, people who study plant cell biology may pursue careers in conservation biology or even botany. So, to summarize what we learned today, we talked about all of the different parts that make up our cells and how they function together to keep us running. A quick review of what we did today leaves us with an understanding of the organelles that are inside of all our cells. Listed on the slide here are all of the organelles we talked about today and all the organelles that you guys added to your cells. It's important to remember that alone our organelles would not be able to do even half as much as they can do together. This is why knowing how our cells work is so important in discovering how life works.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today on this webinar about cells. We hope you had fun making your Play-Doh and your Play-Doh cell with us, and that maybe you learned a few new things about biology in the process. If you have any questions, you can reach out to that email, the precollege@oregonstate.edu, and we'll be sure to answer any questions you have after the webinar. And just a quick thanks to all the people in the Biochemistry Club who helped make this presentation, who weren't able to make it today. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, have a great day. Thank you.